Hey guys, what's up? So this video is brought to you by Linode. If you guys are trying to look into cheap and reliable web hosting, trying to get your web product out there, check them out. They're a growing company. They just recently opened a new data center in Canada. They're opening new data centers all the time. And I've been using them for 8 years. So check them out. The link is in the description tab below. Hey guys, what's up? So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to get started with Django really quickly, and this is about how to actually set up a modern Django stack. So not just actually doing like how do you set up Django, it's actually how do you integrate Django with some of the modern UI tools that everybody's using. So things like React, but in addition to that, you have to actually set up a lot of tooling in order for all that to work together. So in this tutorial series, we'll see how to get Django up and running, very easy from scratch, and then also we're going to be using Node to set up our UI project that'll use React, and I'll show you guys how to actually set up watchers and everything like that, so you can actually use Sass if you want, although it is optional. So first things first is that Django is a popular web framework. This was used, it's still used by Instagram, it was used by Pinterest at first. It's used by a lot of different things. It was built originally around content sites, so it was around like news organizations. And from there, it actually just expanded into this huge open source project, which started to compete with Ruby on Rails. It's still relatively somewhat of a niche market for web development compared to a lot of the other popular options out there. But it is probably the most popular option for Python. The issue with Django that a lot of people have is that it is considered to be a monolithic, very large web framework. And a lot of people these days like to have smaller type of frameworks, but ultimately, as your project grows, your framework is going to get larger. But you know, both frameworks allow you to plug and play, and they're both very modular. So I think both of them give you quite a bit of option and flexibility. So this tutorial is actually going to focus on just actually setting up your modern stack, and then from there you can then branch off into the individual technologies to say, okay, I need to learn more about Sass if I want to use that, or I need to learn more about JavaScript pre-processing, using things like Babel and Webpack, because I'll skim over a lot of that stuff, but we'll see how to actually set it all up and get it working. So first things first is in order to get started with Django, since Django is Python code, you have to have Python installed on your machine. So you need to go to your Python's website if you have internet, and then download the latest version for your operating system, and then make sure it's installed. And if you know you'll know you have it installed correctly if you open up a prompt and then type Python. It should actually do the interactive console, so you can actually type Python code right in there and get the output. So if that's not working, it means Python's not installed correctly, and most likely it means that you didn't add Python to your path. So if you have Python installed, though, you're good to go. Now, a lot of people in this tutorial are going to ask about Pip Environment, like a lot of Python hipsters, I'm sure. And I like Pip Environment, great project, but right now it's too buggy for Windows for me to use it for this tutorial. It just won't work, not correctly. So I have this tutorial's Django example folder. We need something to write our code in, and for this tutorial series, I use Visual Studio Code, which you can also go to Google and just type that and download it. Alright, so here's my folder here, this Django example. I'm going to select this folder here to open Visual Studio Code into that project. There's not any files inside of here, but in order to get started with Django, we need to go ahead and install that. So I'm going to open up my terminal, and then from inside of here, there's something called Pip, which is the package manager. Pip Environment eventually is going to replace Pip, but for right now we're going to use Pip. And I'm not even going to set up a virtual environment. If you guys want to look into that, you can, but for beginners just getting started, that's more headache than it's probably worth. So Pip install, and then just simply Django. That's all you have to do. Alright, so now in order to get started with Django, we're going to do something called Django admin, which, because we have Django installed now, it's going to know what that is. And then we're going to do something called start project, which is a command, if I could spell it right. And then this is where we're going to give it the name of our project. Because this is going to be a blog example, I'm going to call it blog. And this will spin up all the starter code that you need. And you can see now on the left hand side, we now have this folder that has everything that we need in it. There's this manage.py. This is actually how we actually spin up the project. So in my terminal, if I go into my blog and make sure you're in the folder with the manage.py file in there, we can now use that. We can say Python to execute it. So Python manage.py run server. This is how you kick up the Django web server. From inside Visual Studio Code, if you hover over the link and then control click, it should open it up into a web browser. All right, and here you can see that we have the working Django installation. All right, so now what we want to do to get up and running with a modern Django stack is we need to go to our root directory, and we're going to create a new folder that we're going to call our templates. And we need to modify the base code here because we're going to add a file called the views.py. This is considered your backend controller type logic area for Python Django because it follows more of an MVT, model view template kind of thing, instead of model view controller. But anyway, inside of your views, this is where your actual logic, you're dealing with your request response objects, is going to occur. So what we need to do is we need to say from Django.shortcuts import render. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and define our starting point for our application. Every endpoint needs to have a request, incoming request object parameter. And then inside of here, what we're going to do is just say return a render, and then we need to return the request object first, and then the template, and we're going to go ahead and create a index.html template. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. And then inside of our templates, let's go ahead and create a new file, and we'll create index.html. And inside here, we'll go ahead and spell all this out. All right, so now that we have this file, this template, we need to go ahead and modify the URLs. This is the actual routing. All the routing occurs inside of here. So let's go ahead and create a new route for our starting point. And it's just going to simply be an empty string, so the root directory will match this. And in order for us to be able to use the views, we need to go ahead and say from dot, which means root directory, import views. And then we can go ahead and use that now. We could say views.index. That's the method. And then make sure there's a comma here because this is just a list here of different URL endpoints in Django. All right, so this is the views, URLs, and then we have our templates. And then we need to go ahead and do one last thing, which is modify our settings. So we're going to be using something at the top of the Django starting project called base directory. So make sure you know where that is. And then inside this templates directory, there's a or template. It's a list, and then there's also an object, and then object has a key value pair of directories, and that's a list of values that you could have for where Django should look for templates. Okay, so like, there's a stacking order, you can look into that, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and add the template directory that we just added. So we're going to say ospath.join mother f. My phone keeps going off. Sorry about that. .join, and then we're going to go ahead and use that base directory variable that you saw, and then let's go ahead and say templates. Okay, so it's the templates directory that can be found that we just added. So we should be good to go. I'm not sure what I'm in right now. I'm going to close that. So go back to your root directory of the project so that we can do the run server and run our Django project again. Click on the root directory, and then we get a big fat template does not exist. All right, and that's what happens when you actually put your templates in the wrong directory. I wanted to put it in the root directory of the project, but not inside the app that gets created as the starting app module of your Django project. In a nutshell, when you create a Django project, we named it blog. It's going to create an app or module called blog, which is the project name. You're going to create different modules for all kinds of different things that you do. You might have a module for movies, artists, all kinds of different things. And ultimately, though, you're going to have one outer root directory, which is your project name, and then a module that matches your project name, and then a bunch of other modules, most likely, depending on how big your project is. And then the way we set this up here is we told Django to look inside of this directory, and you can see templates is not sitting there. So I'm going to drag it into the right folder, and then we should be good to go. But that is the ultimate, you know, the feedback you get from Django when there's a problem, and it's kind of spelled out for you. For instance, this thing tells you the error exception type is template does not exist, so it could not find template. And then it tells you where it was looking. So it looked into this this wrong folder. Well, no. So Python path. Anyway, I don't know. Let's refresh it. But now it works. I don't know why. It's yeah. That anyway. It works. All right, guys. So now we need to go ahead and get our static content working so that we can actually deliver CSS and see all that working. So inside of our root directory of our project, we're going to create a new folder called static. And this is a convention that they use in Django, so I want to follow that. So in the static directory, let's go ahead and create a CSS. What the hell is that? I just copied and pasted somehow. I want that to be CSS. All right, good. All right, so we have a CSS folder inside of this static, and now I'm going to create a main.css file. And we're going to create our h1, and we're going to turn it to a color of red so that we know that it's working. All right, so now we have our CSS, and if we go to our template, what we're going to do at the top is we're going to use a special like curly brace syntax here where we're going to say load static, and this allows Django to deliver the actual static content. So in order for this to work, we do have to go to our static, our settings file inside of our main app. And we're going to add a static file directory listing. So it's going to be static files underscore dirs, short for directory. And this is going to equal a Python list. So let's go ahead and use the OS like we did before, path.join. And then we're going to use the base directory, same variable that we used before. And then here we're going to say that the static content can be found inside the static folder of our root directory, which is right here. So that tells Django how to find it. So now our template, though, needs to go ahead and load the actual the CSS file. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to say link relation equals style sheet. href is going to be pointed to, this is where we're going to use the another curly brace syntax where we can say static, and then inside the static we're going to go ahead and just point to where it can be found. So we could say css main.css and then close off that curly brace syntax. So now we're loading our actual CSS, and we need to close the tag there as well. So now we're loading the CSS in our template. So when we go to fire up the server again, if everything goes well, the H1 that we had before that used to be black should be red. And when we look at it, we can see it is red. Boom. Just like that. All right, so now we have static content working inside Django. All right, guys, so a little bit about the history of the web and how to get Django up to date with the modern web development tools. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated because what you've seen to date is just what Django offers out of the box. But modern web development these days, if you're going to build the next Instagram or Pinterest or something like that, they're using tools like Babel to compile their JavaScript code. They're using tools like Webpack in order to tie all their modules and JavaScript code together. They're using things like TypeScript when they want to actually have type safety from within their development. If that is considered a priority for them, which it's considered a priority for a lot of major projects, and that's where JavaScript really starts to struggle. And then finally, I'm also going to show you guys how to get set up with Sass, because a lot of companies these days are writing their CSS with Sass, and this is an optional feature though, so if you just want to write raw CSS, you can. But Sass provides a lot of benefits that CSS just doesn't have. All right, guys, so in order to proceed from here, what you're going to need to have on your machine is Node.js. Node.js is going to give us the ability to install things like React and all that other stuff that we need for our project. Babel, Webpack, and all that other stuff included. All right, so now in order to get everything up and running after you have Node.js installed, what we want to do is go to the root directory from within our static folder. We're going to create a new folder that we're going to call our JS. But inside this static folder, let me go ahead and just say open in a terminal. So I'm inside my static folder. And then from here, what I'm going to do is say npm init. And npm is a package manager tool that comes with Node that we can use to install all kinds of different dependencies. We're going to give this thing a blog project name. I'm just going to press enter for everything else. Now that I've done that, we're going to have to install a bunch of dependencies in order to get everything up and running. And really, you just have to kind of follow along here, but we're going to say npm install -d for development. And it's an uppercase D. It stands for development because when we created a new project, we now have inside the static folder this package.json. And this is going to keep track of all the dependencies that our UI needs. So by saying -d, this is going to say that the tools that we're about to install are all development tools and not something that the actual project needs, just stuff that we use to develop it. So the first things first is we need the Babel core project. So Babel gives us the ability to compile old JavaScript to newer JavaScript. We need the Babel preset environment project. This env for and in space. So the preset environment is actually going to give us the ability to write modern JavaScript and then compile it to older JavaScript. Then we need the Babel preset React project for when we want to add React to the project. All right, and we also need the Babel loader because if we're going to be loading JavaScript files that need to be compiled, then Babel needs to be able to compile them. So it needs the Babel loader project in order to do that. We need a CSS loader. So if we want to actually have CSS in multiple files and then load them as we need them, then that's what we need that for. If we want to use Sass, we need to have Node Sass installed. If we want to use Webpack, we obviously have to have that installed. And there's also a command line interface tool that we want to have installed for Webpack as well. So that's Webpack CLI. And then finally, because we're going to be doing, well, you know what, that should be fine actually for right now. All right, now we're going to go ahead and press enter. This is going to have to install a lot of stuff, so it could take several minutes. So again, because we installed all those with a -d, they all got put under the developer dependencies of our package.json, and it keeps track of like the exact package that we're using. All right, so next what we need to do is go ahead and create our webpack.config, and this is going to be a new file. It's going to be in the root directory of our static. So we're going to create a new file called webpack.config.js. And the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and create a path variable that we're going to go ahead and require the path module from Node. So just like that, that comes with Node by default, so you can use that. Now we need to say module.exports equals, and this is going to be a JavaScript object. We need to give an entry point, which is an object. And this entry point is going to say what the starting point should be. So the starting point we're going to say is going to be the source index.js. That's going to be the starting point. Next, we want to go ahead and say that we want it to be watch equals true. That way we don't have to continue to like recompile our stuff every time we make a change. Another thing we want to do is add a dev tool of source map, and you guys will thank me for this. So if you guys have to do tutorials to get caught up on source maps, like there's no other way to debug modern web apps, so this is something that Webpack provides you. All right, so the next thing is we need to go ahead and define the output object. The output object is going to have a few things. We have the file name. This is going to be the name that actually gets created for us, and by default, because our name is app, it's going to be called app.bundle.js. That's going to be the name of our compile.js file that we want. But then we also need to tell it where it can actually find that file. So it's going to be able to find it by saying path.resolve dir name, which is a shorthand for the directory of the root. And then we're going to say put it in a dist directory. So distribution is what that is short for. Next, we're going to go ahead and define a module. And the module gives us the ability to do different things, like use the Babel loader that we installed earlier. Because remember I said when we want to import ES6 JavaScript code that has to be compiled as it's imported, then you need to have your Babel loader configured. So that's what we're doing right now. So we're going to define some rules for this module to say, hey, whenever this rule is fired, then we want you to implement the module. So what we're going to tell this thing is to use a regular expression. We're going to say any JS files that you encounter, and it should be ending in a JS, any JS files you encounter, and we want to go ahead and say excluding the node modules, because we don't want to be looking for that because there's a million node modules out there. We want to say if you match the JS and you're looking to be loaded, then we want you to use the Babel loader that we installed earlier. All right, so that should be good for our module. And then finally, we need this to say that when you run into a JavaScript file, that we want you to actually handle it with Webpack. So we're going to say extensions, and this is where you can say what extensions you want this thing to listen for. In our case, we're just going to say JavaScript extensions. All right, so if we go back up, you can notice that if we have our entry point, if you look at the entry point, it has a source starting point. So let's go ahead and create the source folder inside of our static folder. And this is going to be the source of our UI. And we're going to create a new file in here called index.js. And then here we're going to use some new syntax, which is the constant keyword of ES6, which is a modern JavaScript syntax. And Babel, the tool, is going to take this syntax and it's going to like actually turn it to older syntax that works in all kinds of different browsers. But let's just go ahead and create a X variable and say this is a test. All right, and then we're just going to alert X. All right, and then now what we want to do is go to our templates. And since we're going to be building an app bundle, we want to go ahead and load that app bundle here. And we're going to use the shorthand static shortcut that we have here. And we can go ahead and specify that we want this to be, this is going to be inside the dist. If you remember, app.bundle.js. All right, and then let's go ahead and close off the script. And this should be just before the closing body tag. That way all the DOM elements are loaded before the JavaScript is firing. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to go to our package.json, and where there's a scripts object here, we're going to add a new key value pair, and we're going to give the key the value of Webpack. Or the key is going to be Webpack, and the value is also going to be Webpack. This allows us to actually execute the local Webpack that we have running. So it's going to look for a Webpack config. So if we were to go ahead and run that now from our static folder, all we have to say is npm run Webpack, and this will execute the Webpack script. And it'll execute the Webpack that we installed locally to our project. So it'll look for a node modules folder. And then now it created a dist file with the app.bundle. So if we go to our scripts here, you can see that we're installing and referencing the app.bundle here. So if we go ahead and we run the server, let's go ahead and go to a command prompt here. And I'm going to back up a directory. I'm going to say Python manage .py run server. All right, so this is going to fire up the server again. And now we get the actual result of our bundled JavaScript code. So we're using Webpack to actually bundle that JavaScript code. If we look at the code that got executed for us or that got created, if we go to inspect and look at our sources, and we can go into Webpack here, because we're using source maps, we can actually look inside of here and you can see the actual code before it got compiled. But if we were looking at what the browser is rendering and we were to click on not that, but we were to click on the app, you can see that this is what Webpack is building for us. There's a lot more going on there. And the actual code here is actual code that got compiled to older standards that older browsers still understand. So you can actually write modern day JavaScript code using Babel, but it will compile it to older versions. But then you can also still put breakpoints and stuff like that from within your console. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and see how to get up and running with React. So let's go ahead and kill this server by pressing Control-C. We're going to go and make sure we're in the static directory, so the npm package.json file, wherever that's located. So the static directory, and we're going to say npm install. And here we're not going to give the -d because these are two projects that we actually say you need to have in order for the actual application to be executed. So this is the React and React DOM project, and this will give you the ability to use React in your project. React and React DOM, that can be confusing, but essentially they're two separate projects that got spun off because React started getting into React VR and all kinds of other stuff. So because this actually got installed in a actual project dependency, you're going to see that it gets differentiated from actual developer dependencies in your package.json. All right, let's go to our index.js file here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the ability to use React. So we're going to say import React from React. And then we're going to say import React DOM from React DOM. All right, so now we're using both of those developer dependencies. What am I doing here? All right, import. All right, there we go. All right, so now we have both of those dependencies imported. We need to go ahead and use the React DOM, and we're going to use a render function that's attached to that. The render function has the ability to say, you know what, I want you to add whatever sort of HTML inside of here. This is called JSX, and you're going to have to learn about JSX, but we're going to say this is JSX. All right, so you know the difference. And then next, we're going to want to go ahead and say, you know what, document, we need to pass an element that this thing can attach itself to, because React is going to build the HTML for us. So where we have the H1 here, we're going to replace that with a div ID of root and close that off. All right, so now that we have the div ID of root, React is going to go ahead and attach itself to that. All right, guys, so that should be it. You should be good to go from there. So if we go ahead and kill the Webpack process, make sure you run it again so that it compiles the project. It should compile every time you make changes if everything's working correctly, though. And if we go back to our project's root directory and run the Django server again, we can now see that this is JSX is being rendered. It's using the static content. It's using it within Django, Django's templates, Django's framework, everything else. This div ID root, everything from within it is actually rendered via React. And you can see when we actually have the React DevTools configured from within React Chrome, or not React Chrome, Chrome, there's a Chrome extension that you can install for React development. Also Redux if you want to use Redux with React. But anyway, you can see here that it recognizes that, okay, this is JSX. That's the actual React child element. So from here, guys, what you need to do is you need to branch off. You can actually go to my website and learn more about React or other web development things at codehawk.com. There's also all kinds of free stuff. Go to React's free website. There's all kinds of documentation there. That's going to get you up and running on React. You're also going to have to branch off into all kinds of different things as well. So with Node, most of what you're going to do from here is going to be building JavaScript, React modules. You're going to have different Django endpoints that have Django templates that are going to be rendering different React modules that you're building. I even have tutorials to show you how to set up multiple modules from within a Webpack config so that you can have like 10 different modules from one different project from one watch command. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support. Make sure you guys subscribe and have a good day. Bye.